Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Night Fear. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep. So, before you get settled in, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. My name is Chris. I used to work night patrol in a small town called Larchwood. Only about 800 people live there. Everyone knows everyone. Nothing big ever happens. But one night, something strange did. It was late October. The nights were getting cold. Leaves were everywhere. Wind howled down empty roads, and the streetlights flickered like they always did when a storm was coming. I was doing my usual rounds. Just driving slow, checking the gas station, the church, and the old motels on the edge of town. Most of them were empty this time of year. Except one, the Pines Inn. It was an old roadside motel. 5 rooms. Paint peeling. A rusted sign that buzzed faintly in the wind. A woman named Janine ran it. She had been there forever. Said she liked the quiet. That night, around 11:45 p.m., she called me. "Hey, Chris," she said, voice low. "Can you swing by? Something weird's going on in room 6. I frowned. "You don't have a room 6. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm scared." I got there in less than 5 minutes. Janine was waiting out front in her bathrobe, her hand shaking a little as she pointed toward the last room on the end. "There's a light on in there," she said. "And I heard a radio playing. But that room's been locked since the fire last winter." I remembered the fire. An old man, traveling alone, stayed in room 5. The fire started in the room next to his. Room 6. But no one had checked in there. No name. No record. Just flames. They never found a cause. The room was supposed to be sealed off. I walked over slowly. The wind was cold against my neck. My boots crunched against gravel. I could hear it then, soft static, like a radio not tuned in properly. As I got closer, I also heard a voice. It was faint. Slow. Like someone whispering through the static. I knocked on the door. No answer. I turned the knob. It was unlocked. Inside, the light above the bed was on. The bed was made. Neat and perfect. A small table lamp flickered near the window. On the nightstand sat an old radio, dusty, with a cracked dial. It buzzed softly. And then, it spoke. "Come sit," it said. A man's voice. Calm, raspy. I froze. Janine was standing behind me now, her hand covering her mouth. "I swear to you," she whispered, "there's no power in that room. The wiring's been dead since January." I stepped inside. The air was heavy. Thick. Like the room hadn't been opened in years. It smelled like burnt wood and mold. The window was fogged up, even though it wasn't raining. I walked over to the radio. The voice came again. "Don't leave," it said. Then the radio turned off by itself. Silence. Janine backed away. "I'm done," she said, and hurried back toward the office. I stood there for a few more seconds, unsure what to do. I checked under the bed. The closet. Nothing. I left the room and shut the door behind me. Next morning, I came back with the fire chief. We opened the room again. Everything was dark. No light. No radio. The bed was bare. No sheets. Just burned wood and soot on the walls. The whole room was still fire damaged. I asked Janine if she had cleaned it up between then and now. She said she hadn't stepped inside since the fire. It didn't make sense. Later that week, I asked around. Talked to the older folks in town. One man, Mr. Ray, used to be a police officer years ago. When I told him about room 6, his face went pale. I was the one who found the fire, he said. Back in the 90s. Same room. Same weird static. And a radio that wouldn't stop playing gospel songs in reverse. I laughed nervously. He didn't. He told me they shut the room down after that. Locked it. And every 10 years or so, someone would hear music playing again. Always the same time of year. Always the last room on the end. Back then, they had blessed it. Twice. Didn't matter. He looked me straight in the eye. That room doesn't want to be forgotten. Since then, I drive past the Pines Inn sometimes. Just to check. The building looks the same. But I never stop. And I've never gone near room 6 again. Still, sometimes, when I'm driving late at night and the radio cuts to static, I hear that same voice again. Don't leave. And I wonder if it followed me. It was a quiet town. One of those places where everyone knows each other. I'd lived in Maple Hollow, Pennsylvania, my whole life. Just a small town tucked between cold woods and winding roads. The kind of place where strange things happen, but no one talks about them. My name's Jake, and I work as a night officer for the local police department. Nothing too exciting. Usually, I just drive around empty streets, checking unlocked doors, watching for broken taillights, and making sure the gas station clerk stays awake during his shift. But last Halloween, something happened that I can't explain. It was late, just after 2 a.m. The town was asleep. Cold wind pushed dry leaves across the road like tiny whispers. Streetlights flickered every few blocks. The dashboard heater in my cruiser barely worked, so I kept my jacket zipped to my chin. That night, I was driving down Chestnut Road, a long stretch with barely any houses. Only a few farms and an old, abandoned church that hadn't been used since the 60s. As I passed the church, I noticed something strange. A light was on inside. It flickered, like candlelight. That place didn't have power anymore. The county had shut it off years ago after someone broke in. Nobody was supposed to go inside. And yet, there it was. A dull glow through the cracked stained glass windows. I slowed down and pulled over. At first, I sat there, just watching. My hand hovered over the radio, but I didn't call it in. I told myself it was probably kids messing around. A dare, maybe. Teenagers love playing with ghosts this time of year. I stepped out of the cruiser. The cold hit me harder outside. The wind smelled like wet wood and old leaves. Every step I took on the gravel felt too loud, like the night didn't want me there. The front doors were shut, but the left one hung crooked on its hinges. I pushed it open slowly. The wood groaned like it was in pain. Inside, the air was thick. Dust floated in the light from a single candle, placed in the middle of the church aisle. It flickered on its own, even though there was no breeze. No one else was in there. Hello? I called out. My voice echoed off the walls. Maple Hollow PD. Is anyone here? No answer. I walked forward, boots echoing on the old wooden floor. I passed by empty pews. Some had broken legs. Others had carvings in them, names, crosses, strange symbols. I don't remember those being there before. I reached the candle. There was something drawn on the floor in chalk, a circle, with shapes I didn't recognize. It looked fresh. But I hadn't seen anyone come in or out. I bent down to get a closer look, then I heard it. A whisper. It came from the back of the church. I stood up fast, flashlight raised. The beam hit the far wall, nothing there. I swept it side to side. Who's there? I asked. Again, nothing. The candle went out. Just like that. The flame blinked out without warning. Now I was standing in total darkness. That's when I saw it. In the beam of my flashlight, at the far end of the aisle, just behind the altar, a shadow. Not a person. Not really. It was too tall, and it moved like smoke. It didn't walk. It just slid sideways. Like it wasn't touching the ground. I froze. I don't know how long I stood there, breathing hard, heart pounding. My hand was shaking. The shadow didn't move closer. It just stood there, watching me. I backed away slowly. Then I ran. I didn't even shut the church door behind me. I jumped in my cruiser, slammed it into reverse, and tore out of there. I didn't look back. When I got back to the station, I went to check the town maps, just to clear my head. That's when I learned something that chilled me deeper than anything I'd seen that night. Chestnut Road doesn't have a church anymore. It was torn down last year after the roof collapsed. I blinked at the records, thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was on another road. But I know that road. I've driven it 100 times. I went back the next morning. The church was gone. Nothing left but a patch of dirt and old stones. The grass was dead, and there were deep grooves in the soil where something had been dragged. But no building. No candle. No door. Just cold wind and silence. Sometimes, late at night, I drive down Chestnut Road again. Just to see. And sometimes, I still see that flicker of light in the distance. But I don't stop anymore. I moved to Pine Hollow last fall. Small town. Quiet. Nothing ever really happened there. After my dad passed away, I needed a change. I left the city and found a little rental house at the edge of town. It had peeling white paint, a front porch swing that creaked, and woods behind it that seemed to whisper when the wind blew. The neighbors were kind, but distant. Everyone seemed to keep to themselves. I worked remotely, so I stayed home most days. It was peaceful until it wasn't. It started one cold October night. I had just finished a late Zoom call. The wind was picking up outside. Dry leaves scratched against the windows like little claws. I made tea and sat on the couch. I turned on the old TV the landlord had left behind. It wasn't a smart TV, just one of those bulky ones from the early 2000s. But it still worked. I used a small digital antenna. The channels were fuzzy, and most played old movies or local news. I kind of liked the vintage vibe. That night, the screen flickered. Then it went to static. I waited, thinking it was the signal. Then, something strange happened. Through the static, I heard a voice. It was soft. Barely there. It sounded like a child whispering. I turned up the volume. Let me out. My stomach turned. I changed the channel. More static. I'm still here. The voice again. Different now. Deeper. Sadder. I turned off the TV. The room was silent, except for the sound of wind outside. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe the signal was just picking up radio chatter. Or maybe I was tired. I went to bed, pulled the covers over my head, and told myself it was nothing. But the next night, it happened again. Static. Then whispers. You hear me now, don't you? I turned off the TV again. And that's when I heard something behind me. Not from the screen. From inside the house. A soft knock. I froze. It came from the hall closet. I didn't move for a while. Just listened. Nothing else. I finally worked up the courage to check. I opened the closet door. Empty. Just some jackets and old boxes. I didn't sleep much that night. Over the next few days, things got worse. The static voice returned each night. It got louder. Clearer. Sometimes it laughed. Sometimes it cried. And then the knocking came back. Not just the closet. Sometimes the attic. Sometimes the basement door. One night, I heard footsteps on the porch. I looked out the window, but no one was there. The swing moved on its own. Back and forth. Slowly. I asked around town. People didn't want to talk about the house. One woman at the diner finally told me a little. She said a girl had gone missing there years ago. The family who lived there left in a hurry. Never came back. I looked up the address in old town records. There it was. Name, Melanie Harper. Age, 9, missing since 1997. Never found. The TV kept turning on by itself now. Even during the day. Static. Then her voice. You found me. One evening, I'd had enough. I unplugged the TV. Wrapped the cord. Set it in the garage. That night, I felt relief. No voices. No static. But around 3 a.m., I woke up. My bedroom light was on. The TV was back. Sitting in the corner of my room. Still unplugged. But the screen was glowing. Static. You moved me. I grabbed my phone and ran out of the house. Slept in my car. The next morning, I drove to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Daniels was an old-timer. Been in Pine Hollow his whole life. I told him everything. Showed him pictures of the TV. The static. The voice recordings I had made. He looked at me like I was losing my mind. Then he sighed and leaned back. You're not the first, he said. What do you mean? I asked. That house, something's wrong with it. Folks don't stay long. We don't advertise it. Locals know to avoid it. Why don't you tear it down? He looked away. We tried. Tools break. Fires don't catch. It stays. I moved out that day. Left most of my things. Started fresh in another town. But sometimes, at night, my phone screen flickers. And I swear I hear her whispering. Even with everything off. I'm still here. It was the middle of October when Ethan moved back to his hometown. Ashwood was a small, quiet place in Oregon, one of those towns where everyone knew everyone. He had left after high school, trying to build a new life in the city. But things didn't work out. A messy breakup, losing his job, and the weight of loneliness brought him back. He rented a small house near the woods. It was old, with creaky floors and chipped paint, but it was all he could afford. At night, cold winds slipped through the cracks in the windows. The trees outside groaned when the wind passed. Sometimes, the streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the wet pavement. But Ethan didn't mind. He just wanted quiet. One evening, while unpacking boxes, he found an old photo album. It was from his childhood, pictures of him and his younger sister, Emily. She had passed away in a car crash when they were teenagers. He hadn't thought about her in years. The memories hit hard. He sat on the dusty floor, flipping through pages as the sun dipped behind the trees. That night, something felt off. He was brushing his teeth when he heard a knock. Not at the front door, but at the side window. The house had no porch there. Just tall weeds and an old tree stump. Ethan froze. He slowly walked over, turned off the lights, and peeked through the curtain. No one was there. Maybe it was the wind. Or maybe an animal hit the glass. He went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easy. The house made strange sounds, clicks, knocks, and the occasional whisper of wind sneaking through the vents. Around 2 a.m., his phone lit up. A notification from the security app he had installed last week. Motion detected, side window. Ethan didn't want to look. But curiosity won. He opened the video. There, in the corner of the screen, stood a man. Very still. Wearing dark clothes. Face hidden by the shadows. He didn't move. Ethan waited for the figure to walk away. But the video ended with the man still standing there. He jumped up, turned on all the lights, and double-checked the locks. Every door, every window. Everything was shut tight. The next day, he called the police. Officer Barnes, an older man with kind eyes and a calm voice, came by. "You're not the first to report strange things near Ashwood Road," he said. "There've been a few calls, sightings, noises. Nothing we could prove. Some folks think it's just kids messing around." Ethan nodded, but he wasn't so sure. That night, the knocks came again. This time from the back door. Soft, polite. Almost patient. Ethan didn't answer. He sat on the couch, holding his phone, finger ready to dial 911. Then he heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving along the outside wall. Then the side window. Then the living room. Every few minutes, tap, tap, tap. Ethan stayed up all night. When the sun rose, the noises stopped. But things got worse. His phone began acting strange. Random static in calls. Notifications he didn't remember setting. One night, it even turned on by itself, the flashlight blinking in rhythm, 3 short flashes, then 3 long, then 3 short again. SOS. Ethan tried to brush it off, but the air in the house felt heavy now. Like something watched him from the corners. The photo album disappeared. Then reappeared. Lying open on the kitchen table, flipped to a photo of Emily. Someone had drawn a black X over her face. He started hearing her voice. Whispers. Soft. Sad. Why did you leave me? He couldn't breathe. He thought he was losing it. He returned to Officer Barnes. The old man leaned back in his chair inside. Years ago, Barnes said, a family lived on Ashwood Road. The daughter, about your sister's age, went missing. Folks searched the woods, the lake, everywhere. No body was found. But stories started spreading. A man in black. Always standing near the trees. Never moving. Always watching. Ethan stared at him. What happened? Barnes looked down. Eventually, people moved away. Some say the girl never left. That she's still calling out. And the man? He comes for those who try to forget. That night, Ethan didn't go home. He slept in his car by the gas station. In the morning, he returned to grab his things. The house was ice cold. Inside, the walls were covered in handprints, small, like a child's. All leading to the living room mirror. And in that mirror, Ethan didn't see himself. He saw the man. Standing behind him. Ethan turned, but no one was there. He ran. Left the house. Left Ashwood. He never went back. Months later, a new family moved in. They stayed 1 week. Then they left, saying nothing. No one rents the house now. But if you drive down Ashwood Road, past the rusted mailbox, and look toward the woods at night, you might see someone. Just standing. Waiting. Like he's remembering something you forgot. My name's Chris. I live in a small town called Miller's Hollow, just outside of Oregon's dense pine forests. It's quiet out here. Not much happens. People grow old in their homes. They wave to each other on porches. Everyone knows everyone. I used to be a cop here. Just a patrolman. Nothing fancy. I quit a year ago after something happened, something I still don't talk about much. But some nights, like this one, it creeps back into my head. And I wonder if maybe it wasn't just stress or sleep deprivation. Maybe it was real. It was the start of November. Cold. The leaves had all fallen, and frost covered the ground like a light dusting of sugar. The air smelled of burning wood. People were still taking down their Halloween decorations. That night, I was on my last shift before a few days off. I remember feeling tired. Empty, really. My wife had left 2 months earlier. Said I was distant. Cold. Maybe she was right. I was driving the night patrol route along Pine Road, just outside of town. There were no streetlights there, just tall trees, fog, and the sound of gravel crunching under the tires. It was past midnight. I was about to turn around and head back when I saw something. A man. Standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded a little. He didn't move. Just stood there, facing me. He wore dark clothes and a wide-brimmed hat. I rolled down my window a little. "Sir, you okay?" I called out. No answer. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. Just stood there. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, my radio clipped to my vest. The cold hit me hard. My breath came out in white clouds. "Are you lost?" I asked, walking closer. He still didn't move. I stopped about 10 feet away. Something about him felt wrong. His clothes looked old. Like from another time. His face was shadowed under the hat, but I could see just enough. His eyes were wide open. Too wide. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to step off the road," I said, more firmly. He raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned to look. There was nothing. Just trees. Fog. A broken fence. When I turned back, he was gone. Just gone. No sound. No footsteps. No rustling leaves. I stood there frozen. The flashlight trembled in my hand. I checked the woods. I called out. I even used the radio to ask dispatch if anyone had reported a missing person. Nothing. Eventually, I got back in the car and locked the doors. As I drove back, I kept checking the rearview mirror. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told the chief. He laughed. Said maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was tired. But a week later, I got a call from a farmer who lived near that same road. He said his barn door was open when he woke up. No signs of animals getting in, but everything inside was knocked over. Tools, feed bags, everything on the ground. He also said he saw a man standing by his fence just before sunrise. He described the same figure. Black clothes. Wide-brimmed hat. Pale face. I didn't know what to say. I told him I'd drive by later that night. Just to check. And I did. At 2 a.m., I turned onto Pine Road again. This time, I didn't see anything on the road. No man. No fog. But when I passed the old fence, my radio crackled. Static. Then a voice. It wasn't clear. Just a few words. Like a whisper. "I see you." I stopped the car. The light on the dashboard flickered. Then everything shut off. The engine. The lights. The radio. I sat in the dark, surrounded by tall pines, the wind moving softly through the trees. And then I heard tapping on the rear window. Slow. Steady. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My hands gripped the steering wheel until they hurt. After what felt like forever, the lights came back on. The engine started by itself. There was no one there. I drove home. I didn't go back to the station. I didn't tell anyone. A few days later, I handed in my resignation. Since then, I've heard other stories. People on the edge of town talking about a man in black who watches from the woods. Kids say it's just a Halloween tale. Something to scare friends at sleepovers. But I know what I saw. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear tapping. Always 3 taps. Always slow. I don't answer the door when it happens. And I never drive down Pine Road. Not anymore. What do you think happened that night? Have you ever seen someone who wasn't supposed to be there? I live in a small town called Ridgewater. You've probably never heard of it. Just rows of quiet houses, cracked sidewalks, and woods that stretch out forever. Most nights are still here. Peaceful, even. But some nights feel off. My name's Chris. I'm a part-time mechanic and I used to work night patrol for the local sheriff's department. Nothing fancy. Just driving around town, checking on things. People said Ridgewater was boring. I used to agree until last fall. It started on a cold October evening. The kind where your breath hangs in the air like smoke and your fingertips sting. Leaves scraped across the roads, blown by a restless wind. I was doing my usual rounds, driving the same path I always took past Oak Hollow Road, when I saw him. A man. He was standing under the old flickering streetlight near Whitaker's farm, where no one's lived for years. His back was to me. He wasn't moving. Just standing. I slowed down and rolled down my window. "Sir, are you okay?" No answer. He didn't even flinch. I got out of my cruiser and walked a few steps closer. "You need a ride somewhere?" Still nothing. The wind picked up. I could hear it whistling through the trees. The light above him buzzed loudly, like it was angry. I stepped forward again. And that's when I noticed something was off. His shoes, they weren't touching the ground. He was floating. Just a little. Barely an inch. But enough. I stepped back slowly. My radio crackled loudly in my pocket and the man turned his head, just his head. Not his shoulders. Just a slow, creaking turn. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in years. I blinked. And he was gone. Not walked away. Not ran. Just gone. I stood there frozen for a few seconds. My heart was pounding, my mouth dry. I finally got back in the cruiser, locked the doors, and drove straight to the station. They told me I must have been tired. "It's probably stress, Chris. You've been working too much." I didn't argue. But I knew what I saw. 2 nights later, I saw him again. Same streetlight. Same posture. Same silence. I didn't stop that time. I drove past, eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. But the nightmares started soon after. In my dreams, I was standing under that streetlight. The man would turn to me slowly, mouth open like he was trying to scream, but no sound came out. And then he would start walking toward me, each step shaking the ground. I'd wake up soaked in sweat. I asked around about the old Whitaker property. Turns out, something did happen there a long time ago. A man named Douglas Hart lived there in the 80s. He had a nervous breakdown after losing his family in a fire. People said he wandered the roads at night, trying to find his wife and son. He vanished one evening during a storm and was never found. They said he always stood under that same streetlight waiting. It made my skin crawl. Weeks passed. I quit the night shift. Couldn't take it anymore. I started fixing bikes in my garage instead. But Ridgewater has a way of keeping you close to your fears. Last week, my neighbor's kid came to my door. "Hey, Mr. Chris," he said. "There's a weird man standing outside our house. Under the light. He's been there since last night." I stepped out and looked down the road. Same spot. Same light. Same man. I stared for a long time. And then I noticed, his face looked familiar. It looked like me. Paler. Older. But definitely me. My legs gave out for a second. I leaned against the railing. When I looked back, the street was empty again. I haven't told anyone that part. Who would believe me? Now every night before bed, I check that light from my window. And some nights, I see the figure standing there again. Not every night. Just enough to know he's not gone. Sometimes I wonder if he's watching. Waiting. For me to come closer. For the town to forget. For someone else to see him too. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's stress. Or maybe some places hold on to sadness too long and it starts to grow a face. What do you think happened next? Have you ever seen someone who wasn't really there? I moved to Pine Hollow last fall. A quiet little town. Cold winds, old fences, and tired porches. It felt like a good place to start over. I had just gone through a divorce. My daughter stayed with her mom. The silence in my new home felt heavy, but I thought I needed it. My house sat at the end of a narrow street. Two neighbors, both retired, rarely left their homes. Across from me was an empty lot, and behind my backyard was a line of tall trees that stretched all the way to an abandoned farm. I worked part-time at the town library and filled the rest of my days trying not to feel so alone. Then came October. The leaves had turned brown. The air grew colder. Most nights, I stayed inside with the TV on low and hot tea in my hand. That's when I noticed something strange. There was an old shed in my backyard. The previous owner left it unlocked, filled with rusty tools and cracked jars. It wasn't connected to power. No light switches, no bulbs. But one night, around 11 p.m., I looked out my bedroom window. The shed was glowing. Just a soft, pale light like a lantern. It flickered. At first, I thought it was a trick of the moon. But there were clouds that night. No stars. No moonlight. I stared at it for a long time. Then, the light went out. The next morning, I checked the shed. Nothing had changed. Still dusty. Still empty. Still dead quiet. Maybe I imagined it. But the next night, it happened again. I didn't go outside. I just watched. The light stayed on longer this time. Almost 5 minutes. Then darkness. It kept happening. Every night around the same time. The glow would return, always flickering, always soft. I told myself maybe someone nearby had installed a motion light, or maybe a neighbor's sensor was angled wrong. But no one else could see it. The trees blocked the shed from the street. It was only visible from my bedroom window. On the 5th night, I decided to record it. I set up my phone by the window. But when I checked the video the next day, it showed nothing. Just black. No glow. That night, I stayed up with my eyes on the shed. The light returned. I watched closely. And then, I saw movement. a shadow passed in front of the glow. A shape. Human-sized. But no one ever came out. I ran downstairs, opened the back door, and shouted, "Hey! You're trespassing." No answer. Only wind. I didn't go to the shed. I was too scared. I called the sheriff's office the next morning. A young deputy named Lauren came by. I told her what I saw. She smiled politely. "Could be a raccoon triggering something reflective," she said. "These old properties can play tricks on you." I could tell she didn't believe me. She checked the shed anyway. Found nothing. No electricity. No heat signatures, she said. Probably just your eyes adjusting to the dark. But I knew what I saw. That night, I didn't sleep. The light came back. This time, it pulsed like it was breathing. I felt a chill move through me. Not from the cold. From something else. I stared into the light, and I swear I saw someone standing there. A woman. Long hair. Pale face. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stood in the glow. I couldn't move. And then she vanished. The light went out. The next morning, I opened the shed. For the first time, it smelled different. Like burnt wood and wet leaves. I found something new inside. A photograph. Old, black and white. Faded edges. It showed a woman in a long dress. Standing in front of the same shed. She looked just like the woman I saw. I turned the photo over. Written in pencil, Emily. 1936, last seen October 23rd. That was the date. October 23rd. I felt my chest tighten. I brought the photo to the library that afternoon and asked our town historian about it. He pulled up old records. Emily Parker. Went missing from her father's farm in 1936. Declared dead. Farm was abandoned years later. That was my house. That shed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a chair facing the backyard. At 11:03, the light returned. This time, it didn't flicker. It glowed strong. Then, slowly, the door of the shed creaked open. I stood. A figure stepped out. Slow. Deliberate. It was her. She didn't speak. Just stared at me from the edge of the yard. Then, she raised her hand. Pointed at me. And smiled. The light blinked once, then vanished. She was gone. I stayed awake till sunrise. I packed a bag and drove to my sister's place 2 towns over. I never went back to Pine Hollow. I sold the house to a developer who planned to tear it down. But sometimes, late at night, I still dream of that light. That face. And I wonder, was she warning me? Was I in danger? Or did she just want to be seen? What do you think happened? Have you ever looked out your window and seen something that shouldn't be there? Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. My name's Chris. I live in a small town called Elmsbrook, tucked between a thick pine forest and the river. Nothing much happens here. quiet streets, slow nights. The kind of place where everyone knows each other's business. I work nights as a security officer. It's not an exciting job. Mostly, I drive around town, check the closed shops, and make sure no one's doing anything stupid. But ever since my mom passed last year, I like the silence. The dark roads. The time alone. She used to tell me stories about Hollow Bridge. Said strange things happened there. Lights in the fog. Voices at night. But I never believed that stuff. Old stories passed down to scare kids. Until last fall. It was late October. Cold wind. Leaves crunching under boots. Elmsbrook was quiet, more than usual. Even the raccoons stopped messing with the trash bins. The air smelled like rain and burning wood from chimneys. I started my shift around 9 p.m., driving my usual route. Main Street. Maple Drive. Then up toward Hollow Bridge. The bridge sits at the edge of town. It's old and made of stone. Thick fog always rolls in around that spot. The road bends just before it, so you can't see what's ahead until you're almost there. That night, I saw something. A soft orange glow. At first, I thought it was a car's tail light. But as I got closer, I saw it wasn't moving. Just floating. A lantern. Hanging in midair over the bridge. I stopped the car. The light didn't swing. No wind touched it. It just hovered. Still. Perfect. I got out. Cold air hit my face like ice. I walked slowly toward the bridge, radio on my shoulder, hand near my flashlight. The closer I got, the clearer I saw it. It was a lantern. Old-fashioned. Like the kind you'd see in Western movies. But no handle. No rope. Just floating. I stood there for a minute. Then I heard it. A creak. Like a footstep on wood. But the bridge was stone. I turned my flashlight on and scanned the bridge. Nothing. Then the lantern flickered. And I swear I saw a shadow behind it. Just for a second. Tall. Thin. No face. Then gone. I backed away fast and got in my car. I drove straight back to the station. Didn't say a word. The next night, I told myself it was stress. Or maybe just a trick of the light. I hadn't been sleeping much. Still missed Mom. She used to leave the porch light on, even when I worked nights. Said it made her feel like I was safe. I drove the route again. Same time. Same path. When I reached the bend near Hollow Bridge, the lantern was there again. Exactly the same spot. Still floating. This time, I didn't get out. I just watched. Then my car lights flickered. Once. Twice. And the radio crackled. Not static. Words. A soft whisper, "Don't come back." I threw the car in reverse and got out of there. Over the next few nights, I avoided the bridge. Took longer routes. Even if the chief asked why, I'd just make up some excuse. But the thing is, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started reading up on town records. Old papers. Found something strange. In 1963, a boy named Daniel Whitmore vanished. Last seen riding his bike across Hollow Bridge at night. They never found his body. Just his bike. Stuck in the riverbed. Some said he was taken. Others said he fell in. But the weirdest part? His mom swore she saw a lantern in the woods the night he disappeared. She said it was floating. People laughed her off. I didn't. The next night, I decided to go back. Just once. Just to see. I parked a little ways back. Walked the rest of the road alone. Flashlight in hand. It was colder than usual. The air felt thick, like something was pressing down on me. When I reached the bridge, it was quiet. No lantern. No light. Just fog. I stood there for a while. Nothing happened. Then I whispered, "Daniel?" Just a whisper. Nothing loud. And the lantern blinked on. Not 20 feet away. And this time, there was no shadow behind it. It was in front of me. A boy. Soaking wet. Clothes stuck to his skin. Mud on his face. He didn't speak. He just pointed. Behind me. I turned. And saw nothing. When I turned back, the lantern was gone. So was the boy. I ran. Didn't stop until I was back in my car, shaking. The chief says I've been different since that night. More quiet. More tired. He doesn't know what I saw. I still do my shifts. Still drive the same roads. But I never go near that bridge. Sometimes, though, I pass by the bend. And sometimes, I see the glow. And I wonder if I'd followed the boy that night. Would I be the next one they write about? I live alone in a small house on the edge of Maple Hollow, a quiet little town in upstate New York. People here don't lock their doors until Halloween rolls around. Then, for a few weeks, things get weird. My name is Chris. I'm 38. Used to be married. My wife passed away 3 years ago in a car accident just outside town. Since then, I've stayed mostly to myself. I work the night shift as a dispatcher for the sheriff's office. The house gets real quiet when I'm off duty. Too quiet sometimes. It was late October. Windy, gray days. The kind where leaves dance across the streets like they're alive. I had just finished dinner and was sitting by the living room window, sipping tea. There's an old streetlight outside, buzzes sometimes, flickers a lot. But that night, it was steady. I was scrolling through social media, mindlessly thumbing past photos of people in costumes, when I saw something in the corner of my eye. Movement. I turned toward the window. There was a figure standing under the streetlight. A tall man. No coat, no hat, no expression. Just staring straight ahead. Not at my window, just forward. I watched for a while. He didn't move. Maybe just a drunk guy? Or someone's lost uncle? After 5 minutes, I stood up and turned on the porch light. That usually sends folks wandering off. But this man, he didn't even flinch. I opened the door and stepped outside. The wind cut through my hoodie. "Hey!" I called. He slowly turned his head toward me. His face looked wrong somehow. Like it didn't fit. Eyes too close, mouth too wide. No anger, no sadness, just empty. I stepped back into the house and locked the door. When I peeked again, he was gone. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me sit up straight. I even kept my phone on the nightstand with 911 dialed halfway in. The next day, I checked the security camera I'd set up facing the front porch. It recorded all night. At 1:23 a.m., the man stepped under the streetlight. He didn't move for 3 hours. Then the camera glitched. Froze. Then cut to 4:45 a.m. and he was gone. That wasn't the worst part. I noticed something just before the feed glitched. In the second frame, before the freeze, the man turned his head toward the camera. I zoomed in. His eyes were wide open. Mouth slightly parted, as if mid-whisper. And even through the grainy footage, I could see his lips move. They formed the word, "come." That night, I told myself it was stress. Too many lonely shifts. Too much scrolling and too many ghost videos online. I made a promise, no screens after 10 p.m. It didn't help. The next evening, the streetlight started flickering again. But this time, the flickering seemed rhythmic. Almost like a code. I stood in the kitchen, watching it through the window. It blinked 5 times, pause, 3 times, pause, 5 again. I don't know Morse code, but I swear it felt deliberate. Like a knock on a door. Then came the sound. Not outside, inside. From the basement. A thud. I froze. My basement door was shut. Always kept it locked. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door slowly. The steps creaked like always. The air felt colder than usual. My breath fogged up. There was no one down there. But on the floor, in the dust, was a single handprint. Small. Like a child's. I don't have kids. I didn't sleep that night either. Just stayed up, lights on, shotgun nearby. Around 2 a.m., the doorbell rang. Once. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then stopped. I looked through the peephole. No one was there. But under the streetlight, he had returned. Same man. Same blank face. Only this time, he was holding something. A child's drawing. I couldn't see the image, but I knew it was one. My heart thudded in my chest. I turned away from the door and whispered to myself, "He's not real. He's not real." But when I turned back, the drawing was tucked into my doorframe. I waited until sunrise to grab it. It was drawn in crayon. Red and black lines. A picture of a tall man standing under a streetlight, looking into a window. My window. The figure's face had no eyes. Only a wide red smile. I called the sheriff that morning. Told him everything. He looked at me like I needed rest, maybe some time off. Probably some Halloween prank, he said. I didn't argue. Just nodded. That was 2 nights ago. Last night, the streetlight outside my window stayed off. Completely dead. No flicker. No buzz. Nothing. And I still don't know which is worse. When it's on. Or when it's not. I live in a small town called Maple Hollow. Fewer than 1,000 people. We know each other's names, dogs, and what kind of pie we like at the diner. I work as a night officer here. Nothing big, mostly kids sneaking out, or the occasional call about raccoons tipping trash cans. But that night was different. It started like any other shift. Cold air, quiet streets, the smell of wet leaves sticking to my boots. Fall was heavy this year. The trees were bare, and the wind never stopped. A storm was coming, but slow. You could feel it in your chest. I was driving along Ridgeview Road when I saw the porch light at 23 Forest Lane flicker. That house had been empty since the Jennings family moved out 10 years ago. I remember because they left after their daughter vanished. Just disappeared. No signs. No clues. The light blinked once. Then again. Then off. I slowed down. Maybe it was a wiring issue. Maybe a bird hit the sensor. But something about it felt off. I parked near the mailbox. Got out. The gravel crunched under my boots. The air smelled like metal, like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I radioed in my stop, but got static. I walked up the path. The porch creaked as I stepped on it. The door was shut, but not locked. I knocked. Nothing. I opened the door just a bit. "This is Officer Blake. If anyone's inside, please say something." Still nothing. I stepped inside. The house smelled like dust and old wood. Everything was still. No wind. No sound. My flashlight cut through the dark like a knife, showing peeling wallpaper and a dusty sofa still covered in a white sheet. Then I heard it. A soft tap 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 from upstairs. Like bare feet on wood. Hello? I called again, hand on my holster. No answer. I moved slowly up the stairs, one creak at a time. The hallway stretched out in front of me, lined with doors. The second one on the right was cracked open. That's where the tapping came from. I pushed it gently. It swung open with a low groan. Inside was a girl's room. Pink wallpaper with tiny stars. A broken dollhouse in the corner. Dust on everything except the floor. The footprints were small. Barefoot. Leading from the window to the closet. I aimed my light at the closet door. My mouth felt dry. I called out again. Nothing. I stepped closer. Reached for the handle. Pulled. It was empty. But then the porch light blinked again, 3 times, this time. I saw it through the window. And suddenly, the bedroom light flicked on. Only, there was no bulb. That's when I noticed it. A photo on the nightstand. I picked it up. It was of the Jennings girl. Her name was Lily. She was 10. The photo showed her smiling on that same porch. But someone had scribbled something on the back in red crayon. It said, "I'm still here." My radio crackled. "Blake? You there?" I pressed the button. "Yeah. I'm at the Jennings house." Porch light turned on. Thought I saw something. The place doesn't feel right. Pause. Then, "Officer Blake, there's no power at that address. It was shut off years ago." I turned to leave. But then, behind me, the closet door creaked again. Even though I'd left it open. I turned quickly. Empty again. But the footprints were gone. That's when the house got cold. Not chilly, cold. Like the air had been sucked out. I could see my breath. My flashlight flickered. The walls creaked like something was moving inside them. I ran down the stairs. I didn't look back. Outside, the wind had picked up. The trees bent, and the porch light blinked again, on, off, on. Like Morse code. I got to my car, slammed the door, and drove back to the station. I didn't write the full report. I just said I checked the property. No signs of entry. But I haven't slept right since. Some nights, I drive past that house. The porch light still blinks sometimes. And sometimes I think I see something in the window. A little girl. Staring back at me. Smiling. It happened in Pine Hollow, a small town with no more than 3,000 people. Everyone knew everyone. Nothing big ever happened there, just quiet roads, cold winters, and the same old stories. But one story never left me. My name's Eric. I used to be a sheriff's deputy in town. Back then, I was dealing with a lot. I had just gone through a rough divorce. My daughter, Lily, stayed with her mom in Colorado. The house felt empty. Quiet in the kind of way that messes with your head. I spent most nights patrolling the far edges of town. There was a road that led past the old Miller house. Folks said it was haunted. Teenagers used to dare each other to go inside. You know, the usual small-town rumors. I never believed any of it. Until that one November night. It was cold. Real cold. You could see your breath in the air like smoke. The wind howled through the trees. Leaves scraped across the pavement like whispers. I was parked by the edge of Hollow Creek Road, headlights off, window slightly down. just sitting in silence, thinking about Lily. Wondering if she was asleep. Wondering if she missed me. Then I saw it. A light. Just a small one, flickering in the top window of the old Miller house. No one had lived there in over 20 years. No electricity. No reason for any light to be on. I radioed it in, but got no response. Figures. Signal out there was always spotty. So, I stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots. I walked slow. The cold bit through my uniform. The house looked worse than I remembered. Shutters hanging loose. Wood rotting along the edges. A front porch that sagged in the middle like it was tired. Still, the light flickered. I stepped inside. The door groaned as I pushed it open. It smelled like mold, dust, and something older, like time itself had rotted. My flashlight cut through the dark and thin, shaking beams. The house creaked with every step. Old furniture lay broken and scattered. A family photo hung crooked on the wall, glass cracked, faces faded. I climbed the stairs slowly. The light was coming from the far room upstairs, the one that used to be a nursery. The door was slightly open. I pushed it. The room was lit by an old lamp sitting on the floor. Not plugged into anything. Just glowing. And next to it was a baby monitor. Not a modern one, an old one. The kind with static. I could hear faint crackling. Then, a voice. "Daddy?" I froze. It was Lily's voice. Soft. Sad. Just one word. "Daddy?" I dropped to my knees. My heart was pounding. I picked up the monitor. "Lily?" I whispered. Nothing. Then the lamp turned off by itself. Pitch black. I turned on my flashlight again, panicking, scanning the room. It was empty. I stood up quickly and backed out of the room. My breathing was loud. I kept looking behind me, every second feeling like something was there, just out of sight. Back downstairs, I tried my radio again. Static. Then a whisper. "Come back." A man's voice this time. Low. Cold. I ran out of the house. I didn't look back. I got in my cruiser and drove straight to the station. The chief didn't believe me. Said I was tired. Grieving. Maybe I was. But I know what I heard. I took the baby monitor with me. It sat on my kitchen counter for a week. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. One night, I woke up to the sound of static. It was on. I walked to the kitchen, heart racing. Through the crackling, I heard it again. "Daddy?" I moved out the next day. I left Pine Hollow 2 months later. Transferred out west. But I still have that monitor. It's in a box, taped shut, in the back of my closet. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear it. Just for a second. And I wonder, did something in that house learn her voice? Or was it really her? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. I moved to Sycamore Lane 3 months after my wife died. We used to talk about getting out of the city and finding a quieter life. But she passed before we could. I found a small house in Maple Hollow, a tiny town in upstate New York. Cold, quiet, and surrounded by pine trees. The house was old. Real old. The kind where the floorboards creak if you breathe too loud. But it had a front porch, a little fireplace, and no neighbors for at least a mile. It felt like what I needed. The locals were kind. Most were older. I introduced myself as Chris, the quiet guy from Chicago. I didn't tell them much more. I didn't want to. A few weeks in, I started walking at night. It helped clear my head. The nights in Maple Hollow were different, dark, yes, but peaceful. You could hear owls. Sometimes, just wind blowing through dead leaves. One night, after an early November storm, I went for a walk. The air was cold and smelled like wet dirt. The wind had knocked branches all over the road. I had my flashlight with me, just in case. About half a mile down the lane, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. It was an old metal call box, mounted on a crooked wooden post, just standing there near the edge of the trees. I'd walked that path dozens of times. It was never there. The metal was rusty, the speaker cracked. But the button still looked clean. I stared at it for a while. Then, out of curiosity, I pressed the button. Static. Then a voice. Very faint. Almost like a whisper. Hello? I stepped back. The voice repeated. Hello? I didn't say anything. Just stared. Then it said, Chris? My blood turned to ice. No one in town knew me like that. I hadn't given out my full name. I hadn't even told people where I was living exactly. I walked away quickly. I kept looking back. But the woods were still. Only the soft sound of wind brushing through the branches. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I asked at the general store if anyone knew about the old call box down Sycamore Lane. The clerk, an older man named George, looked confused. There ain't any call boxes out there, he said. Those things were taken down years ago. Power lines don't even reach that far anymore. He seemed serious. So I nodded and didn't press. That night, I didn't go out. I stayed in and kept the porch light on. The wind howled. I heard creaks I hadn't noticed before. A soft tapping, maybe from the attic. The next night, though, I couldn't help it. I went back. I had to know if I imagined it. The call box was still there. This time, I didn't press the button. I just stared. And it rang. A sharp, sudden buzz like an old rotary phone. I almost dropped my flashlight. Then the voice came again. Chris, why didn't you come last night? I couldn't speak. It sounded like her. Like my wife. But it wasn't right. It was her voice, but slower. Cold. As if someone was mimicking her. Chris, it whispered again, you left me. I turned and ran. Full sprint back to the house. Inside, I locked every door and shut every curtain. I didn't walk the next night. Or the next. I kept to myself. Kept the lights on. I even thought about leaving town. But then, the box came to me. I woke up one night to a sound outside. Buzzing. Not loud, but constant. I looked out the window. There, at the end of my driveway, stood the same metal box. Still mounted to that same crooked post. The light above it flickered. I couldn't move. It buzzed again. The porch light flickered and went out. Then the box said, Chris. It's cold. Please, don't leave me here. The next morning, it was gone. No sign it was ever there. No post. No wires. Nothing. I packed a bag that day. Told myself I'd give it one more night. If anything else happened, I'd leave. That evening, it snowed lightly. The world outside looked soft and quiet again. But I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard tapping on the glass. Soft. Rhythmic. Like a fingertip. I walked to the window slowly. Pulled the curtain aside. There was nothing. Then, from the side of the house. Buzzing. I went to the back door. Opened it. And there it was again. The call box. Sitting on the ground this time. No post. Just wires, twisted and sparking. I stepped outside, slowly. It buzzed once more. I shouldn't have picked it up. But I did. The moment I touched it, everything went quiet. Even the wind. Then it whispered. "You were supposed to die too, Chris." The voice wasn't hers anymore. It was something else. I threw it. The box shattered into pieces. That night, I drove straight through until sunrise. I never went back. I've looked online. I've searched forums and ghost blogs. Nobody's ever heard of a callbox haunting. But I wonder sometimes. What if someone else picks up? What if it rings again? The name's Jake. I grew up in Maple Hollow, a quiet little place with foggy roads, wooden fences, and old pickup trucks parked in every driveway. Folks around here don't like change. They don't lock their doors. And they certainly don't talk much about strange things. But there's one story that never left me. It was a cold autumn night, 2 weeks before Halloween. The air smelled like burning leaves and wet soil. I had just finished my shift with the local sheriff's department. I wasn't an officer, just part-time dispatch, but I knew the radio well and could tell when something felt off. That night, we got a call from an old woman who lived alone on the edge of town. Her voice shook as she spoke. "There's someone walking through the cornfield behind my house. But there's no footsteps. Just a light." I asked her what kind of light. "Like a lantern," she said. "But it's floating. And it's humming." Now, Maple Hollow has a lot of stories. Kids say the fields are haunted. Old folks talk about a man who vanished back in '62, last seen near those same fields. But I never gave much thought to any of it. Until that call. Sheriff Daniels was out on another call, so I told her I'd swing by and check it out. I was 23, dealing with a recent breakup, sleeping in my mom's guest room, and feeling like a failure. A creepy light in a cornfield? Honestly, it sounded like a good distraction. I drove over in silence. No music. Just the sound of the engine and the wind. When I reached the old farmhouse, the woman was waiting on her porch. She didn't speak. Just pointed to the field. I stepped out and saw it. A soft, white light glowing about 20 feet in. Not bright like a flashlight. More like moonlight trapped in a jar. It swayed gently, like someone was holding it and walking slowly between the rows. But there were no footsteps. No sound. No wind in the corn. "Stay here," I told her. I grabbed the flashlight from my truck and started toward the field. Every step made a soft crunch on the dry leaves. The light stayed ahead, always just out of reach. I called out. "Hey! This is private property. You need to leave." No answer. Just that hum she'd mentioned. Low, steady, and strange. It felt like it was under my skin. I moved deeper. The cornstalks closed in around me. My flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then it died. The glowing light ahead blinked out too. I stood there, surrounded by silence and tall shadows, trying not to panic. Then, I heard it. A whisper. So close, I thought it was in my ear. "Why did you leave her?" I froze. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it knew. It knew about Emily. The girl I left last winter. The girl I still dreamed about. My hands shook. I turned around, trying to retrace my steps. But the corn was thick, and every direction looked the same. That's when the humming started again, right behind me. I spun around. The light was back. But now, it wasn't floating. It was in the chest of a man. He stood tall, face hidden by shadows, his chest glowing like a lantern had been buried inside him. The light pulsed, beating like a heart. I couldn't move. He stepped closer. "She waited for you," he whispered. "And you never came." I turned and ran. I don't know how long I ran. The corn never seemed to end. The light behind me never dimmed. I stumbled out of the field gasping, face scratched, knees bloody. The old woman was gone. My truck was still there. I jumped in and didn't stop driving until I got back to the station. I never told Sheriff Daniels what really happened. Just said there was no one there. Probably a prank. But that night? That man? The light? It wasn't a prank. A few weeks later, I quit the department. Moved in with my brother in another state. Tried to forget. But sometimes, when the room is quiet, I hear the hum. And in my dreams, I see the field. The light. The man. I've read stories since then. About will-o'-the-wisps, phantom lanterns, and spirits that wander fields at night, searching for the people who let others down. And I wonder, was it really just a ghost? Or was it something sent to remind me of what I lost? What do you think? Have you ever seen a light in the dark that didn't belong? My name is Lauren. I live in a quiet town called Pine Hollow. It's the kind of place where everyone waves hello, even if they don't know your name. The streets are lined with tall oak trees. We get fog in the fall, thick and slow like it's crawling through the town. Last October, my husband Chris passed away. A sudden heart attack. He was only 36. Ever since, the house has felt too big. Too quiet. I stayed busy during the day. But the nights were long and lonely. I still slept on my side of the bed. I still made coffee for 2 in the mornings. People said grief comes in waves. But in Pine Hollow, it came with something else. It started on a Wednesday. I had just finished doing the dishes and sat on the couch, watching old TV reruns. The wind outside was picking up. Leaves scraped across the porch. Then I saw it, the porch light flickered once, then twice, and went out. I figured it was just the wind or maybe a bad bulb. I got up, wrapped myself in my robe, and stepped out with a flashlight. It was cold. I could see my breath. The porch boards creaked under my feet. I unscrewed the bulb, replaced it with a spare from the kitchen drawer, and went back inside. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing small sounds. Taps on the windows. Something brushing against the front steps. I told myself it was just the wind. Maybe a raccoon. The next night, the porch light flickered again. This time it blinked on and off 5 times. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then it stopped. I felt a strange pressure in my chest. I didn't know why, but it felt intentional. Like someone was signaling. I told myself I was just tired. But the next day, things got worse. When I came home from the grocery store, the porch light was already on. I never leave it on during the day. I checked the switch. It was still flipped to off. I stood there for a minute, staring at the bulb. The air was still. Too still. No birds. No breeze. Just me and that silent porch. That night, I dreamed of Chris. In the dream, he was standing at the edge of the woods behind our house. He looked sad. His mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear anything. I woke up sweating. And the porch light was on again. By now, I was afraid to go near it. I called a local electrician named Mike. He'd fixed our ceiling fan the year before. He came over the next morning, climbed up on the ladder, checked the wiring. "Everything looks fine," he said. "You sure this isn't a power surge?" I shook my head. "It only happens at night. And always in the same pattern." He replaced the fixture anyway. "Try this. If it still acts up, let me know." I thanked him. He drove off. I stood on the porch and watched his truck disappear into the fog. That night, it happened again. But this time, there was more. I was sitting on the couch, just like before, trying to read. The light blinked once. I didn't move. It blinked again. My chest tightened. Then I heard a knock. Not on the door. On the glass. The front window. It was soft. Barely there. Like fingertips. I froze. The knock came again. This time slower. Tap, tap, tap. I stood, heart pounding, and walked to the front door. The porch light was glowing steady now. But through the curtain, I could see a shadow. Just standing there. Not moving. Not saying anything. Just watching. I didn't open the door. I backed away. I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff's office. Deputy Matt showed up 10 minutes later. He walked the perimeter of the house, checked the woods. Nothing. No footprints, he said. But it's foggy. Might have disappeared. I told him about the light. The pattern. The dream. He didn't laugh. He didn't roll his eyes. He just nodded. "You're not the only one," he said quietly. "A few folks on the other side of town have reported strange lights. Same flickering. Same times." He looked over his shoulder at the porch. "We think someone's been moving through the woods. Watching houses. Could be nothing. Could be someone playing games." He gave me his number and told me to call if anything else happened. That night, I slept with the bedroom door locked. The flashlight on the nightstand. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up to a cold draft. The porch light blinked on. Once. Twice. 3 times. I didn't go look. I stayed in bed, frozen. Then I heard it. A whisper. It came from the hallway. "Lauren." Soft. Too soft for the walls to carry. But I heard it. I felt it. Like it brushed past my skin. The next morning, I found the bulb shattered. Tiny shards scattered across the porch. The front door was still locked. But something had been there. I packed a bag and left for my sister's place across town. I never went back. Eventually, I sold the house. The new owners installed a camera on the porch. I didn't tell them anything. A month later, the wife sent me a message. "Hey, just wondering, did your porch light ever blink in patterns?" I didn't answer. I just blocked the number. I still dream of Chris sometimes. But now, he stands in the hallway instead of the woods. And sometimes, I wake up at 2:13 a.m. for no reason at all. Just to check if the lights are off. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. It was a cold evening when I found myself driving down a narrow, quiet road, the kind where the trees seemed to crowd in on you from both sides. It was the sort of place you'd pass through without a second thought if you didn't know the area. The rain had started to fall in steady sheets, the sound of it tapping on the windshield soothing, almost hypnotic. I was heading to a small cabin, far away from the city, the kind of getaway people take to escape the noise of daily life. The cabin was remote, tucked away on the edge of a thick forest. I had rented it for the weekend to unwind, hoping the solitude would help me clear my mind. The evening was quiet, too quiet. As I pulled up to the cabin, the rain had turned into a gentle drizzle, and the wind rustled through the trees, giving the night a soft, eerie hum. It was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind you notice when you're alone and surrounded by nature. I entered the cabin and set my things down in the small, cozy living room. There was a fireplace in the corner, and the light from the flames flickered gently, casting long shadows on the walls. The room smelled of wood and pine, a comforting scent that made me feel at ease. I settled into an armchair by the fire, letting the warmth wash over me as the rain continued to fall outside. The storm, though gentle, made everything feel a little more isolated, a little more remote. It was the perfect setting for a peaceful evening. As the night wore on, the rain seemed to pick up, the sound now a constant, soothing background to the crackling fire. I had just finished my book and was about to settle in for some sleep when I heard something. At first, it was so faint I thought I imagined it, just a soft creak, like the house settling. But then it came again, a little louder this time. My heart skipped a beat. It was coming from the hallway. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Houses make noises, especially old ones. The wind could be causing the boards to shift. But something about the sound, so deliberate, so rhythmic, made me uneasy. It wasn't the random creak of an old house. This was different, like something or someone was moving just out of sight. I stood up slowly, my feet quiet on the wooden floor. The fire was dimming, leaving only the soft glow of the embers. The hallway was just beyond the living room, and as I moved closer, I could feel a tightness in my chest. The sound was clearer now. There was no mistaking it, it was the soft thud of footsteps, slow, as if someone was pacing. But there was no one in the cabin but me. I had checked earlier, making sure all the doors were locked, the windows secure. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. It could be the wind, I told myself again. Or perhaps the house was just settling in the storm. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I walked down the hallway, the sound of my footsteps loud in the silence. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the floorboards beneath me were reluctant to let me move forward. The hallway seemed to stretch on longer than it should have, and my hand hovered near the wall, as if bracing myself for something. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The footsteps stopped. I stood still, waiting, listening. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. And then, in the stillness, I heard something else. A soft whisper, barely audible, but distinct enough to send a shiver up my spine. I couldn't make out the words, but the voice sounded distant. Like it was coming from far away, but somehow also right beside me. My mind was racing now. Should I go back to the living room? Leave the cabin? But something held me in place, a mix of curiosity and fear that made it impossible to move. After what felt like an eternity, I took a deep breath and moved towards the door at the end of the hallway. The whispering grew fainter, and the weight in the air lifted just a little. But as I reached for the doorknob, I froze. The handle was cold, colder than it should have been. And just as I was about to turn it, I heard it again, clear this time. The voice wasn't whispering anymore. It was speaking directly to me, and the words were unmistakable. "Don't open the door." I stood there, paralyzed, the door feeling as if it was holding me back. My heart raced in my chest, and the voice, calm, yet urgent, echoed in my ears. The room felt even colder now, and I knew that if I opened that door, I wouldn't be alone anymore. I backed away slowly, my feet heavy, each step reluctant. The hallway seemed to stretch farther than it had before, and I found myself stumbling back towards the living room. The fire had died down to almost nothing, leaving only the soft glow of the embers. The rain outside had slowed, but the sound of it still filled the air, masking any other noise. I sat back down in the chair, trying to calm my breathing, but my mind raced with questions. Who or what was in that cabin with me? And why had it warned me? The unease lingered, filling the room with a sense of dread that I couldn't shake. This happened to me a few years ago, in my hometown of Driffield, and I still remember it as if it were yesterday. It was Valentine's Day, and I was walking with my friend Kirsty to her house. I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but I do remember that the path we took led us past a small memorial garden. It's a peaceful spot, with a few flowers, a bench, and a monument to the war. A small river runs nearby, and there's a path that goes behind the bench, which is the one we decided to take that night. It wasn't quite dark yet, but it was getting close. I remember it was around 6 p.m., because the church bell rang just as we were walking by, marking the hour. We were chatting away, just like we usually did, when we got closer to the bench. And then, out of nowhere, we both just stopped talking. We didn't plan it, but we both turned to face the bench at the same time. We just stared at it for what felt like ages. There was a man sitting there. He had his back to us, and at first, I didn't think much of it. He looked like he was wearing a large coat, with a high collar, kind of a dull green color. He had a large bag next to him, and I honestly thought the bag was a small child huddled on the bench. But then I realized the bag was far too big for that. We stood there, frozen, staring at him for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few seconds. Then, at exactly the same moment, we both realized something strange. The man didn't have a head. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but that's exactly what we saw. There was just this dark, gaping hole where his head should have been, with the collar of his coat flaring around it. It wasn't like he was hunched forward or looking down, he just had no head at all. That's when Kirsty screamed. She bolted across the road, not looking back, and waited for me on the other side. I was still too shocked to move at first. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The man didn't react at all. He didn't even seem to notice Kirsty screaming, and that's when I started to feel really uneasy. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he was leaning forward, and that's why we couldn't see his head. So, I decided to walk around the bench to get a better look. The whole time, he didn't move. Not an inch. When I finally got to the other side, I saw it clearly. He wasn't hunched forward, he really didn't have a head. Just this gaping blackness where his neck should have been, with no sign of a face or anything. But his hands were resting on his knees, and he had feet, and everything else about him seemed normal. Except for the fact that he had no head. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. The fear hit me all at once, and I ran after Kirsty as fast as I could. When I caught up with her, we both stopped for a moment to catch our breath. But as we paused, I glanced back at the bench. And that's when I saw it. The man's arms, his arms were moving. Slowly, almost as if he was adjusting his position. But it was enough to make my heart race even faster. We didn't stop running until we got to her house, and when we finally made it inside, we didn't speak for a while. It wasn't until we were both sitting down, trying to catch our breath, that Kirsty finally spoke up. "You did see that, didn't you?" she asked, her voice shaking. And we talked about it, everything we had seen, everything we'd experienced. We both saw the same thing, a man in a green coat, sitting on a bench with a bag next to him, and no head. She even mentioned that she had thought the bag was a child, just like I had. We both tried to make sense of it, wondering if maybe he was a figure from the past, someone who had lost their life in the war, waiting for a loved one, or grieving for a lost friend. But honestly, we'll never know for sure. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I swear this really happened. If it weren't for the fact that Kirsty saw it too, I'd wonder if I'd imagined it. I've had other strange experiences since then, but none of them were quite as unsettling as this one. There was something about that headless man that just stayed with me, and it still does. It happened when I was 17, staying at my best friend Anna's house. It was one of those typical nights, just hanging out in her living room, catching up on old times and laughing. Her son had just been put to bed, and we were enjoying the peace and quiet. Now, the layout of Anna's house is simple. You walk into the living room, and from there, you can see the hallway that leads to the bathroom and kitchen. I was sitting on the far side of the room, up against the wall on the floor. Anna sat directly across from me, facing me. It's one of those moments where I wish she had seen what I did. We were laughing and having a good time, when out of nowhere, I thought I saw something move in the hallway, just out of the corner of my eye. At first, I assumed it was Anna's son. He was only 3 months old at the time, and thought maybe he'd somehow managed to climb out of his crib. I looked over at the hallway, expecting to see nothing, but I was wrong. When I looked again, I almost didn't believe what I was seeing. My brain couldn't quite process it, even now I still struggle to fully understand it. There, standing in the hallway, staring right at me, was one of the most horrifying things I have ever seen. And believe me, it takes a lot to spook me. It looked like a skinned dog. Its skin was torn off in places, still bleeding, and you could see all the muscles and tendons exposed underneath. It had no lips, but it looked like it was growling at me. Its eyes, those eyes, were locked onto mine, and it didn't look away for even a second. I couldn't look away either. It stood perfectly still, just staring at me. I couldn't even process the sight at first. I just froze, staring back, and my body went cold. It didn't move closer, but it didn't retreat either. It was just there, glaring at me, with that hollow, grotesque face. I remember the exact moment I snapped out of my stupor. I immediately stopped laughing and jumped up from the floor. Anna, completely oblivious, kept asking what was wrong. She didn't see anything. I couldn't even speak at first. All I could do was point toward the hallway. I don't know why I couldn't speak, but I was too terrified to even make a sound. I kept thinking to myself, what is it? Anna grabbed my arm and pulled me close to her, probably because she could see the sheer panic on my face. I was frozen. I don't know if she saw the way I looked, but it was like my whole body went numb. Eventually, I managed to start talking, but I was speaking so fast in a panic that she couldn't understand a word I was saying. When I looked back toward the hallway, it was gone. Just like that, it vanished. The relief I felt was only temporary, though. I couldn't shake the image from my mind. I spent hours trying to calm down enough to explain to Anna what I had seen. It was like something straight out of a nightmare, and I couldn't believe it had happened. After that night, I never sat in the same spot again. And I never walked down that hallway by myself. I never saw the thing again, but that image, it's burned into my mind. I can still see it clearly, like it's happening all over again. It still haunts me, and sometimes I even have nightmares about it. But there's one strange thing that happened afterward that I don't know how to explain. 3 weeks later, my German Shepherd's chain was found in the backyard, snapped at the end. No dog. Just the chain, pointed toward the woods. My dog was never the type to run off. He was loyal and always stayed in the yard. Even if he somehow managed to get loose, he wouldn't have run off that far. My father suggested that maybe he chased after some coyotes into the woods, but my dog never came back. Sometimes I wonder if the thing I saw that night was some kind of warning, or maybe a sign of what was to come. I'll never know for sure. All I know is that what I saw was real. It's something I'll never forget, and even though not many people believe me, Anna does. She was there that night, and she knows what happened. I'm 17 now, but when I was 10, my family and I lived at my grandma's house. It was a cozy little place, and she always had a way of making things feel special. One of the things she gave me was an interactive doll called Dolly. She wasn't just a regular doll. Dolly could learn to talk and walk as I played with her. I also had another doll, just a simple porcelain one, that I named Doll. I always loved playing with both of them, but Doll was my favorite. One day, Dolly stopped talking. I panicked and ran crying to my brother, telling him that Dolly was dead. He told me not to worry, that the batteries must have died and he would get new ones the next day. I felt a little better after that, but the next part is what really terrified me. Later, while I was having a tea party with Doll and Dolly, something strange happened. Dolly fell over, and then, out of nowhere, she started talking again. But it wasn't normal talking, just gibberish, nothing that made sense. I felt this cold rush of fear and grabbed Doll, running to my brother again, crying even harder. He came in, picked Dolly up, and hit her head, saying, "There, everything's fine now." After that, I didn't want to play with Dolly anymore, so I left her in the corner and started playing with Doll instead. That's when I heard a voice. A girl's voice, soft but clear, saying, "He hurt me." I froze, holding Doll tightly, and asked, "Who was that?" The voice answered, "Me, Dolly." I screamed and huddled in the corner, terrified. My brother came running in, asking what was wrong. I could barely speak, but I told him. Dolly talked. He just looked at me and said I needed some fresh air, so he took me outside to catch turtles. The whole time, I was in a daze, still shaking from what had happened. When we got back, I went upstairs and put my turtles with the others in the tank, trying to forget about Dolly. But then, I heard her voice again. This time, it was worse. "I'm not trying to scare you," she said, "but I do want you to kill your turtles." I was in complete shock. I yelled, "No, go away," but Dolly's voice came back, even colder this time, "If you don't kill those turtles, I'll smash Doll." I was petrified. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to get away from her. I picked Dolly up, rushed to my trunk, and shoved her to the bottom. I piled my toys and books on top of her, thinking that would keep her hidden, out of sight, out of mind. I went downstairs to eat dinner with my brother, trying to put it all out of my head. But when I went back upstairs later, everything was different. I walked into my room, and my heart sank. Dolly was on my bed, hidden under the covers, and Doll was smashed up on the floor. All my Barbie dolls' heads had been ripped off. I was in complete disbelief. I couldn't stop crying. I ran downstairs and told my parents, but they didn't believe me. My dad seemed concerned, though, and said he would take Dolly to the dump right away. We moved a few times after that. But every now and then, when I was around 12 or 13, my dad would mention Dolly, and I'd get a cold shiver just thinking about her. I didn't want to think about it, but it still haunted me. The last time we moved was last year. While I was going through some old boxes in the attic, I found Dolly again. I hadn't seen her in years, and I didn't even know she was still around. I took her upstairs and asked my dad why she was down there. He said he thought I might want her back someday. I was confused. But I figured I'd grown up, that maybe I had imagined everything when I was younger. I took Dolly to the guest room and sat her next to some books, just setting her there like she was any other doll. That night, I let my niece, who was 6 at the time, sleep in the guest room with me because my room wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I was getting dressed when my niece said something that stopped me dead in my tracks. "Dolly scared me last night," she said. She said she wanted us dead. My blood ran cold. I had never told her about Dolly. No one in my family had spoken about her for years. I rushed into the guest room, my heart pounding, and grabbed Dolly. She wasn't just sitting there anymore. Something was wrong. Something had changed. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like Dolly had somehow moved. I ran outside, threw her in the burn pit, and doused her with lighter fluid. Then I set her on fire. As the flames crackled, I swore I heard a voice. Yelling. Screaming. Coming from the fire. Me and my niece both heard it. And we both swore that Dolly was still alive, somehow. I don't know if what I heard was real, or if it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I've never been able to shake the feeling that Dolly isn't truly gone. There's something about her, something unnatural, that still haunts me to this day. And I'll never forget the terror I felt, knowing that whatever was in that doll wasn't something I could escape so easily. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. His hands, his voice, and the name he gave. Me, it all felt so real I still can't make sense of it. This happened in the summer of 1982 at the time I was married with 3 young children. My oldest, John, was about 7 years old. We lived just down the street from my parents, so the kids visited them almost every day and grew very close to them. John in particular had a special bond with my dad. From the time he could walk, my dad would take him to the garage to teach him how to use tools or give him a paintbrush and a bucket of water so he could paint wood scraps. My dad even taught him to help build birdhouses by handing him the right tools. 5 years before this, my dad had suffered a heart attack and became semi-retired, which gave him more time to spend with the kids. Over the next few years, my dad had 2 more heart attacks, and he was diagnosed with diabetes and FEMA. After his death, we learned that his doctors had told him he didn't have long to live, but he never shared this with the family. In July of 1982, my mother called to tell me that Dad had suffered a massive heart attack and was in the intensive care unit. My sisters and I spent hours at the hospital by his side, talking to him and holding his hand. Even though he never regained consciousness, we were told that his major organs were shutting down and he probably wouldn't last much longer. I had been at the hospital for 2 days straight, while my husband stayed home with the kids. One of the nurses encouraged me to go home and get some rest before coming back the next morning to relieve my sister, so I left around 7:00 p.m. and went home. When I walked in, my kids were waiting anxiously to hear about Grandpa. John especially listened closely as I explained that Grandpa was probably going to be with Jesus soon. John started to cry and I hugged him, trying to comfort him, but I ended up crying too. After putting the 2 youngest kids to bed, I told John it was time for him to get his pajamas on and get into bed. I told him I needed to take a quick shower. but I'd be in shortly to tuck him in. I showered quickly, got dressed and went into John's room. As soon as I walked in, John sat up, furrowed his brow and asked, "Why did you kiss me with wet lips?" I told him I had just walked into the room and he must have been dreaming, but he was very serious and insisted that he wasn't asleep. He said I closed my eyes to say my prayers and asked Jesus to take care of Grandpa when he got to heaven, and I was not asleep then. He said, "I felt you breathe on my cheek and then you kissed me with wet lips. Why did you do that?" At that exact moment my phone rang. I rushed to the living room to answer it, and it was the nurse from the hospital telling me that my dad had just passed away a few minutes ago. I knew in that instant that the kiss must have been my dad saying goodbye to his closest grandson. I went back into John's room and told him that Grandpa was now in heaven with Jesus and that his prayer was a beautiful one. I said, "Grandpa is proud of you for asking Jesus to take care of him, and he must have been the one to leave that wet kiss on your cheek on his way to heaven." John smiled a huge smile and seemed very pleased with himself. For many years my son would tell me that he had dreams of Grandpa. In those dreams they would talk and laugh just like they did when Grandpa was alive. Now John is 35 and he still talks about that night. It feels as real to him now as it did 27 years ago. We both truly believe it was my dad's final goodbye with a kiss. My story begins in Crum, Texas with my daughter Echo, who was 12 at the time. One night Echo came into my room crying, saying that something was on her bed, touching her. My ex-husband got up and checked the house and the outside but found nothing. I told Echo it was just a bad dream and let her sleep in our bed for the rest of the night. However, this wasn't the first time it had happened, and it continued for a while. Eventually, we moved her into a room with her brothers, hoping that would help, but the strange occurrences didn't stop. In 1997, we moved to Florida with nowhere to live and ended up in a Motel H on International Drive. Echo, now 14, still felt the presence of something touching her. I asked her to describe what she was feeling. She told me that when she lay down she felt footsteps on her bed, as though something or someone was crawling on all fours toward her. Her stomach would tighten and she felt like a claw-like hand running all over her body. She couldn't scream or talk. I smiled and reassured her that it was just a dream, that sometimes dreams feel very real, but no matter where we live, this entity seemed to follow Echo. When she turned 16, I left her father and we moved into a nice apartment with my 18-year-old son, Echo, and my 14-year-old son. By this time, I had started practicing witchcraft. I had met a friend who introduced me to magic, so there were some strange things around the house. After a week, we realized that the apartment was haunted. Echo and I heard growling coming from the closet we shared, and one day I looked in the mirror while getting ready for work and saw Echo with her throat cut. Echo's experiences continued. In one night she got upset because I didn't believe her. She said, "I wish this would happen to you once so you would know what I'm talking about." 3 nights later I went to bed, leaving the door cracked. The boys were playing video games in the living room and Echo was watching them. I felt like someone had laid on top of me, pushing me into the mattress. I could hear Brea breathing in my ear, and then it felt like I had been raped. I felt it roll off the bed and I couldn't move or scream. I sat up quickly and looked around, but the room was empty. I could still hear the boys in the other room. I felt sick, like I couldn't shake off the feeling. Echo came into the room and asked, "Mom, what's wrong?" I told her what had happened and she almost started Crying, she said, "Now you know what I've been dealing with all the time." That's when I decided to throw away all my witchcraft books and materials. I didn't want to feel that kind of fear again, but the apartment remained haunted. A few days later, my nephew stayed with us. I told him the room was haunted and he laughed, saying he wasn't afraid. He agreed to sleep in my room. The next morning he admitted that the room was haunted. Something had tried to pull him off the bed all night. I finally told my parents about the situation, but at first they didn't believe me. I could understand how Echo felt now. My father, who had passed away, told me to get the house blessed. He knew I was walking a different path, but he still encouraged me to bless the house, saying, "You walk from God, not God walking from you." I went home and blessed the house, but it didn't work. In fact, things got worse. Faces started appearing on the carpet and friends, and I saw a half-figure walking outside. When my lease was up, I moved out. During the search for a new apartment, I started asking if the places were haunted. People would look at me like I was crazy. Before we moved in, I blessed every window and door in the new apartment, and my father, a former preacher, came over and did the same. A month later, the attack started again. This time it attacked Echo first, then me. On the same night, I kept repeating, "I plead the blood of Jesus," but it didn't work. I wasn't praying the right way. Every night, Echo, when I would read the Bible before bed. It had been a year since I left witchcraft. During the last attack, Echo felt raped and I was held down by the side of my head. I could hear a dark voice saying something, and the room was filled with pure evil. I thought we were never going to get rid of this thing. Then it hit me. I was praying for the wrong thing. I couldn't fight what I couldn't see, but God could see it. So that night I prayed for God to send his battling angels to rid the house of this entity. I went to bed first. Echo was still in the room with me. As I lay there, I saw the room grow darker. Shadows flew around the room, one of them holding a sword. I heard what sounded like a distant battle. Then everything went quiet. The air seemed lighter and I felt a deep peace come over me. I called Echo into the room and told her, "You will never be attacked again." Echo left for job training for a year and a half, and now at 24 she hasn't been attacked again. Did I create this entity? I don't know. Echo was being attacked before I ever got into magic. Do we still see ghosts? Yes, Echo and I still see and feel them, but we've learned to ignore them and move on. When I was 13, I experienced something so terrifying that to this day I can still feel the fear in my bones. It all started in our apartment at the old Meadows in Houston, Texas. My parents were out grocery shopping and my brother and cousin had gone off to do their own things. I was alone in the apartment, or so I thought. I was sitting on the couch holding the Nintendo controller, paralyzed with fear. Something felt horribly wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around and see who or what was standing behind me. The terrifying part was that there was no one else in the apartment, no living human being. It was just me. I had been living in the apartment with my parents, but I didn't have a bed at that time for reasons I still don't remember. My bed was gone, so I was sleeping on the floor in a corner of the room while my parents had their bed. My mom worked cleaning apartments, and one day she came home excited to announce that she had found me a mattress. It was a soft, thick mattress, kind of like a rolled up sleeping bag covered in a plaid fabric that looked like something from Burberry. She said it would work until she could get me a proper bed. That mattress, though, came with an uninvited guest. A few nights later, I began to hear my name being called softly but distinctly. At First I asked my parents if they had called me. My mom would respond angrily, saying nothing and tell me to go back to sleep, but this happened again and again. Usually around 3 o'clock or 4 a.m. when I asked about it, my parents looked at me like I was crazy. They didn't hear anything. Was it a ghost? My mind raced with that possibility. Was it my imagination? The strange calling didn't stop with just me. One night I heard the same voice calling my parents' names. My mom would wake up confused and say, "What do you want, Jacqueline?" But I wasn't awake. I was asleep and I had no idea what she was talking about. The same thing would happen several times and the sense of unease just kept building. One night I felt something tugging on my blanket. It was a strange light pull at the end of the blanket near my feet. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but it happened again that night. All three of us were awake and I heard the voice again calling my name. My mom asked, "What, Jacqueline?" but she hadn't called me. We hadn't even been talking about me, so who was calling my name? After a while the occurrences grew worse. The tugs on my blanket turned into something more. Pushes at night. I would feel someone or something pushing me on my back, arms or thighs. It wasn't a huge push, but it was enough to feel real, like when a friend playfully nudges you on the shoulder. At first I told myself it was just a dream, but the pushes kept happening. I would check on my parents, but they were always sound asleep. The pushes felt like they came from human hands, but who was doing it? It didn't stop. At night things started happening. During the day, objects I or my family placed in certain spots would mysteriously move or disappear. Cheese, clothes, even drinks. You put a drink down, get up to answer the phone, and when you came back it was gone like magic. One day my parents were out working and I was at home with my brother and cousin. I went to take a shower, locking the door behind me. I took off my clothes, laid them on the floor with the new clothes I was going to wear, and hopped into the shower. But when I finished, my clothes were gone. I looked everywhere, under the sink, in the bathroom closet, even in the hamper. They were nowhere to be found. I assumed my brother and cousin were playing a prank, but there was no way they could have sneaked in. The door was locked and I would have heard them if they had tried to come in. An hour later I found my clothes on the couch. The ghost had moved them. That wasn't even the scariest part. What came next made my blood run cold. As time passed I began feeling like I was being watched, especially when I was alone. I would go to the living room to play Nintendo, but when I walked out of my room I would sometimes think someone was home, only to find that no one was there. I would hear voices coming from the kitchen or the living room, people talking. When I went to check, no one was there. I could feel someone watching me, and it wasn't friendly. I'd get these electric chills down my spine and I became terrified to be alone. It was like an invisible presence was standing behind me, waiting. I tried not to look back. I prayed with everything I had, asking for protection, but I was still scared. Then one night I overheard my mom talking to my dad. She was explaining that one afternoon, after coming home exhausted, she had laid down on the mattress. While lying there she felt someone pushing her several times. At first she thought it was just her imagination, but she felt it again and again. She also admitted that sometimes when she was alone she felt as though someone was watching her. My dad then shared that he had felt the same thing. They both concluded that the strange happenings in our apartment were tied to the mattress. A few weeks later I came home from school to find that the mattress was gone. My mom said she had given it away to one of her cousins, Melly, whom she didn't particularly like. After the Mattress was gone. The strange events stopped. No more pushes, no more voices, no more things disappearing. The apartment felt normal. Again curious, I asked my mom one day where she had gotten the mattress. She told me it had come from an apartment where people were getting rid of their things. The woman who lived there had passed away the day before my mom brought the mattress home. I knew then that the mattress was the source of all the strange activity. My mom smiled and said, I know. Why do you think I gave it to my Ellie? When I returned to Houston, Texas, I got quite a surprise. My brother had bought a big 5-bedroom house in a modest neighborhood. From the outside it looked like a safe haven, but the inside told a different story. I didn't immediately move into the house at first. I stayed in some apartments where my dad worked, and since we got free rent it worked out well, but due to the high crime rate in the area we eventually moved out, and that's when I ended up at my brother's house. He had often mentioned the ghostly lady who haunted the house. According to him, she had been murdered. Their robbery was the likely motive. 2 men broke in and killed her near a bedroom by the front entrance of the house, and he thought she'd been shot. At the time I thought he was just messing with me. I didn't think much about the ghost until 2 nights after I moved in. Things had been normal and I had forgotten about my brother's warnings, but then one night the lady made her presence known. I couldn't see her, but I felt her. She sat on my bed close to my face as if she wanted me to know she was there. I tried to ignore the feeling as best as I could and eventually went to sleep. A few nights later I tried to put the whole experience behind me. I had been in the house all day and hadn't felt anything strange, but around 2 or 3 a.m. when I was about to fall asleep, the lady returned. This time she sat on my bed again, but this time she started tapping her foot. I could feel it clearly. Someone was sitting there tapping their foot. I stayed still for a moment, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, but it wasn't. I could feel it, and I was shocked but not terrified. I told myself it was probably the lady, and I didn't feel any negative energy or threat. Still, I wasn't going to stick around. I gathered the courage to get up, turn on the light, and walk down the hallway to knock on my aunt's door. I wasn't going to stay in that room alone, not with an unknown presence, whether it was a ghost or something else. 3 months later something else happened. It was late, around 11 p.m., and I was hungry. I went to grab a burger, and when I walked back to the house I noticed someone near my aunt's car. I looked twice and the person was still there, but when I walked up the driveway there was no one there. I even checked around the car, but the person had disappeared. It felt strange, but in a way I felt comforted. Maybe the lady was just making sure I got home safe that night. The lady hasn't appeared as much recently, but I do feel like I have a guardian watching over me. I'm not scared anymore. I think of her as my ghostly buddy sharing the house with me. After all, who's to say we can't share our home with the unknown? This experience happened just last night. It was around 11:45 p.m. and I was asleep when, for no reason, I suddenly woke up. At that very moment I realized I was having trouble breathing. I was gasping for air, and the best I could do was take shallow, rapid breaths. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I tried to get up from bed, that's when things started to get really strange. I tried to move my arms, but it felt like something heavy was pinning them down. I struggled for a few seconds, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't free myself. I managed to lift my right arm, but just when I thought I had gotten it free, it was pushed back down to my side. That's when I realized I wasn't going to be able to escape. The best I could do was move my head to the side and try to scream for help, but no sound came out. My mouth wouldn't work. I could feel panic rising, but I couldn't do anything about it as I lay there frozen. I thought I saw a dark shadow crawling up the wall toward the ceiling. I'm not sure if it was real or just my imagination, but just as I thought I saw this shadow, I heard a laugh near my ear. It wasn't a human laugh, but more like something echoing in my mind. This was followed by a strange ringing sound, something I've never heard before. The sound lingered for a minute or two, and as it began to fade, the pressure that had been holding my body down also started to lift. First the pressure lifted off my chest, then my arms, and finally the rest of my body. The relief was immediate. I took a deep breath and felt a wave of relief wash over me. I lay in bed for a few minutes afterward, trying to process what had just happened. I could still hear a buzzing noise in the room, but I wasn't as bothered by that as I was by the feeling of helplessness. I kept replaying the event in my mind, but I couldn't come up with any logical explanation. I felt uneasy, but I tried to sleep again, choosing to sleep on my side rather than my back, and eventually managed to fall back asleep. The next morning I woke up to find a bruise on my right wrist. Just to make sure I wasn't imagining things, I asked a coworker at work to look at my wrist and tell me what she saw. Without hesitation, she asked, "Why is your wrist bruised?" At that moment I started to question what had really happened. Now I'm left with so many questions. What caused this? Was it a sleep-related experience or something more supernatural? I don't have any answers, but I can't shake the feeling that something happened that night in my brother's house. There are 3 of us who live there: my aunt, me, and a ghostly lady who sometimes sits on my bed at night and taps her foot to make her presence known. My brother's home in Houston is humble,
but it's shared with a ghostly friend. We all know about a lady who was robbed and murdered near the main entrance of the house I had been staying at my mother's home for a month. I often visit my parents and stay with them for extended periods, but after a month I was ready to go back to my brother's house. The first night I returned, everything seemed normal until around 11 o'clock p.m. That's when the power went out. There was a total blackout in the house. When I went downstairs to ask my aunt about it, she replied, "It's that lady messing with us. All the neighbors still have electricity." We went into the kitchen to look through the window and saw that our house was the only one in the neighborhood without power. There was nothing wrong with the fuse box because the oven's clock was still lit. When I asked my aunt how she was so sure it was the ghost lady, she confessed something that sent chills through me. A few days earlier, when my aunt had come home alone in the afternoon, she noticed the ceiling fan in the living room shaking violently. There was no wind and all the doors and windows were shut, so she couldn't understand why the fan was moving like that. She tried to brush it off and went about feeding the dogs, but around 10:30 p.m. as she was watching TV, she started hearing noises upstairs. What kind of noises? I asked, my eyes wide in the dark. It sounded like someone was moving furniture upstairs, she explained, her voice low. The sound was so loud that it didn't just send chills down her spine, it felt like needles pricking all over her scalp. Upstairs we have an entertainment room with a TV and 2 large sofas, one of which is a love seat, along with a coffee table in the center. My aunt continued describing how she stepped into the hallway and turned on the light near her room to hear the noises more clearly. Suddenly it sounded like someone picked up the love seat and slammed it against the wall. Terrified, my aunt started to walk toward the main entrance to leave the house when black out the lights in her room and the hallway went out and the entire house was plunged into darkness. She told me she ran out of the house so fast she could have won an Olympic gold medal. She sat on the sidewalk calling my mom to explain what had happened. The only advice my mom gave her was, "What's the big deal? You know it's the ghost lady. Lady, go back in and go to sleep somehow." My brave aunt went back inside. There's no way I would have gone back into that house that night. What's really frustrating about this situation is that every night at 10 p.m. we have to turn off the lights. As if we're little girls with a bedtime curfew. If we don't at 11 p.m. our ghost lady makes sure she does it for us. Believe me, it's sad, but we have no choice. 2 years ago my husband, our 2 kids and I moved to Austin, Texas. We settled into an apartment and on the second night I woke up to a strange sensation. My bed was shaking. It felt like someone had their hands on either side of my legs, pushing up and down on the mattress. Having had similar experiences throughout my life, I knew right away what was happening. I wasn't scared, though I was used to this kind of thing. We've lived here for 2 years and a lot of strange occurrences have happened since then. Then one time I was putting laundry into the washer when the dryer door suddenly opened halfway. It stayed open for about 30 seconds before slamming shut on its own. Cabinets would open by themselves. I'd go into the kitchen to close one, and the next time I went back in, a different cabinet would be open. One day I came out of my bedroom and started heading down the stairs, and I saw a figure hanging from the ceiling above me. I couldn't see its face, but the pants and shoes were clearly male. I smoke outside and there's a glass door beside where I stand. One day I saw the initials JP on the window. My kids are too young to write letters or numbers, so I knew it was left there for me to see. The next day my 3-year-old was sitting on the stairs talking to someone beside her as if she was having a conversation. Then I heard her say, "Mommy says those are bad words." I asked her who she was talking to and she replied, "My friend." I asked what her friend's name was and she said his name is Jay. I decided to tell Jay that he could stay as long as he didn't scare the kids or teach them bad things. I also told him that if I ever forgot to talk to him, I'd appreciate it if he gave me a little sign. Now there's a new presence in the apartment. It started on May 28th. I was giving the kids a bath when a bottle flew off the back of the toilet heading straight for my 18-month-old's head. I caught it in midair and said, "That's not funny, don't do it again." Then another bottle. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Which was behind the others did the same thing. After that, some deodorant fell off the sink and then everything stopped. The next night I was lying in bed unable to sleep. I looked over at the
bedroom door and saw a female figure standing there. She scared me so badly it felt like she was staring right through me, like she was looking into my soul. She had messy brown hair, a white nightgown with puffy sleeves, and it looked like her throat had been slashed or that she had been hung. She was about 55. I rolled over trying to ignore her and get some sleep, but I couldn't rest. I stayed awake the entire night feeling uneasy. Since then I've been feeling angry, sad, and depressed. I snap at the smallest things, and I've never been like that before. As I sit here typing, my mouse has fallen off the desk twice. For No apparent reason. I'm starting to believe that this female spirit is affecting not just me but our entire household. Could this all be in my head? I don't know. There's just so much happening that doesn't feel like it can be explained away by imagination. Plus, I've had spiritual experiences everywhere I've ever lived, but this time is different. This time my husband has also seen shadows in the hallways where there are no windows. There's one bedroom with a window that looks into the hallway, but we always keep the door shut because no matter what weather, the heat or the air conditioning is on, that room always stays freezing cold. He's also told me that in the mornings when he comes downstairs, he feels like someone is behind him, and he's heard footsteps on the stairs even though no one else is there. I'm a 13-year-old girl and we live in the small farming community of Hutto. I've had some weird experiences throughout my life, and I'm not sure if it's just my imagination or something more. When I was an infant, we lived in an apartment in Austin, and there was the spirit of an old lady there. Now looking back, I think she must have died in that apartment. She looked like a typical elderly woman, short curly white hair, glasses, and I think she wore a shirt with a flower on it and jeans. She would appear every so often, and my mom said she would get scared. I remember having two experiences with this ghost. Once, when I was a baby, I was in the corner playing with pots and pans, just make noise like any typical baby. The old lady came through the wall and just stared at me. I screamed. That's the only experience my family knows about. The second time, I remember feeling like she used to stare at me while I slept. It just came back to me recently. Another ghost experience I had was with a beloved neighbor who passed away from a heart attack. We lived in a house in Round Rock. At the time, it was me, my mom, dad, and my little brother Andrew. My mom, dad, and I all saw him. He would move things around like an ornament off the Christmas tree, my dad's plate, and even a propane tank. We would see his shadow, and I would hear him sometimes too. This was about 3 years ago. My neighbor's name was Terry. I don't know if it's possible, but when I think of him, I get really sad. We lived in that house for about 9 years, but we've since moved to our house here in Hutto. Since moving here, I've had more experiences. I've heard footsteps upstairs in my room and in my two little brothers' rooms. I've also seen a figure, a black woman dressed like a gypsy, wearing a white shirt with sleeves that go down to the elbows and a blue ankle-length skirt. It was strange. I've had two recurring dreams about Terry's house. In the dream, I'm supposed to stay there. I leave my keys and duffel bag on an end table near the stairs and go out to talk to my old neighbors, but then I notice one of them staring at the house, and when I look, the lights start turning off and on. I go back inside to get my things, but when I walk past the stairs, I see two little boys, maybe about 3 and 5, playing. I reach out to touch the boy closest to me, but my hand goes right through his head. I just looked at him and screamed as loud as I could. The whole scene changed and it became a slumber party. Then Terry showed up and said, "Miss me?" That's when I woke up, drenched in sweat. I told my mom about the dream, except for the part where the scene changed. She just said, "Don't worry about it," so I put it out of my mind. Another time I was singing when suddenly I heard a voice shush me. I was home alone and I just stopped singing, thinking maybe it was my imagination. I also see things out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I tell my mom, but she always says there's nothing here. Don't worry. At this point, I don't know if I can believe her anymore. Our house isn't blessed, and there have been a lot of ghost sightings here. The house is on old farmland, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the strange occurrences, but I can't shake the feeling that something's here, or maybe I'm just imagining it. I live in the house I grew up in Corpus Christi, TX. I'm 28 now, and my family moved into this house when I was just 2 years old. I've had a few strange experiences in this house over the years, but one stands out from my childhood. When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I had an experience in my bedroom that I'll never forget. I had a children's movie viewer, and one day I saw something jump out of it. At first it appeared as a lady, an old woman who I later realized must have passed away in the house. I greeted her and said hello, and she didn't respond. The lady then changed into a few different things, but I can't really remember what they were. Eventually she transformed into a fox or a dog, and it ran out of my room. I was terrified at first, but when it ran away, I called it back, wanting to ask questions. It wasn't scary, and I wasn't afraid anymore. After that, nothing happened again. 4 years ago I got married, and now I have a 19-month-old son. We bought the house from my parents after they retired and moved out of town. My son sleeps in the same room I did as a child. We've lived in the house for a little over a month now, and he's always had no problem going to sleep. Our bedtime routine is simple. He takes a bath, brushes his teeth, we read a story, turn on his music box, turn off the light, and close the door. He always puts himself to sleep without crying. But 3 days ago everything changed. On Sunday night, today is Wednesday, I put my son to bed as usual and went to fold laundry in my room, which is at the back of the house. I heard him fussing a little, but that's normal. Sometimes he plays or fusses before falling asleep. This time, however, he started screaming and crying like I've never heard before. He climbed out of his crib and started banging on the door, screaming, "Mama, mama, mama!" Of course I rushed to him, trying to calm him down. I took him back to his bed, but he was in full panic mode. I ended up taking him to my room for a while to settle down. I was shocked by how terrified he was. After we both calmed down, I rocked him to sleep and put him back in his room. I closed the door and went to bed at about 10:30 p.m. At 1 o'clock a.m. he woke up screaming again in the same terrified tone, so I put him in bed with my husband and me, just so we could get some sleep kind of during the day. And in the evenings he's not afraid to go into his room, play, or get his toys. He's fine as long as the light is on, but when the light is off he just stares into the room from the hallway. Monday night he had to be rocked to sleep again. When I told him it was time for bed, he immediately went into panic mode and wouldn't lie down in his crib, even though I told him I would stay with him. I ended up rocking him to sleep and left the door open, and thankfully he didn't wake up that night. Last night I had class and my mom came over to babysit. When I got home early enough to put him to bed, I noticed he didn't seem anxious at bedtime like before. I decided to try putting him to bed as usual. He turned on his music box and lay down without any problem, even been hugging and kissing me good night. But when I turned off the light and closed the door, he freaked out. He climbed out of his crib, even though I had lowered it to the lowest setting, and ran to the door. I opened it immediately and he ran straight to my mom, who was sitting on the couch. He kept looking over her shoulder toward his room as though something was in there. I ended up rocking him to sleep again, and I left the door open so he could see the light, just in case he woke up scared again. He was fine after that. My son talks a little, and the only odd thing he's done is point into the hallway while I'm putting him to bed and say da 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 da. Even when his dad isn't home, I have a dog and a cat, and neither of them acts. Strangely, no barking into corners or anything like that. I've never felt cold spots in his room, heard voices, footsteps, or anything else unusual. None of his toys go missing or get moved around. I haven't seen anything since my childhood encounter, and I've never watched or creeped out until recently. We haven't had any relatives pass away recently, and I can't think of any reason for a spirit to present itself. Now I guess I'm looking for some understanding about what's going on. My husband works 2 night shifts a week, and I'm really creeped out in my own house right now. I've been praying extensively in his room every night before bed, but I just don't want my son to be scared of his own room. I want him to feel safe, but it's hard for me to reassure him when I'm feeling a little scared myself. In Houston, my aunt used to work in some apartments where a tragic incident occurred. A man had committed suicide. The office workers became concerned when they hadn't heard from him for a few days, so they decided to check on him. Sadly, when they arrived at his apartment, they found him dead in his bedroom with a gunshot wound to his head and a gun lying on the floor. The housekeeping lady at the apartments was too afraid to clean the apartment where the suicide had happened, so the managers called in another housekeeping lady from a different company to do the job. None of the workers mentioned the suicide to her because there was no need for her to know about it. She came in, cleaned the apartment, and later ran into my aunt, who she told the following story to. While cleaning the apartment, she was particularly frightened in the bedroom where the suicide took place. As she was putting garbage in a bag, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. A black shadow passed behind her quickly, but enough to unsettle her. After that, she felt a sudden chill, though she didn't say anything to my aunt at the time. My aunt, not wanting to scare her, didn't mention the suicide either. 2 days later, the apartment's make-ready guy was sent to do the final touches. He knew about the suicide, and my aunt and her co-workers playfully teased him about being spooked by the ghost of the man who had died. The make-ready guy assured them that he didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, so there was no reason for him to be scared. However, a few hours later, the make-ready guy came to my aunt. Looking visibly shaken, he explained that he had nearly had a heart attack while working in the bathroom of the bedroom where the suicide occurred. He had gotten thirsty and was walking toward the bedroom door to leave and get a drink, when out of nowhere the door slammed shut with such force that it made his heart skip a beat. All the doors had been left open, as there was no reason to have them closed. It was a hot day in Houston with no wind, and there were no footsteps or sounds of anyone walking out. After a few moments, he managed to calm himself and slowly opened the door, only to find the apartment empty. He even went outside to check around the building, but saw no one there. Feeling spooked, he went back inside, gathered his things, and quickly left the apartment. The make-ready guy told my aunt he wasn't about to lose his sanity for $8 an hour. He knew exactly who slammed that door. When I was very little, my grandma lived in a pretty large house with her husband, who wasn't my biological grandpa, but was more like a step-grandpa. He had already passed away from a silent heart attack by the time I came along. The house and the area around it had always been strange. My cousin had a cat that she loved dearly, and my grandma would often keep it for her. One day the cat went missing. When it came back, its fur had been shaved off except for the very tip of its tail. Not its, but just the tail. And the next day the cat was found dead In the road before my grandma married my grandpa, he had been married to another woman who had sold her soul and dabbled with demons. She hated my grandma and had asked her friends to torment her. There was one room in the house that everyone hated. My grandma was a devout Christian, as were many of her friends. In that room she had a vanity with pictures of her friends placed in the mirror. One day she went to the bathroom or another room, and when she came back all the pictures were on the floor face down. When she asked her husband about it, he dismissed it as if it was nothing. Another strange event occurred with my cousin, the one whose cat had been shaved. She slept in that same room one night and woke up to see a figure come through the wall. The figure moved from one side of the room to the other, and when my cousin tried to scream for her parents, no sound came out. Her lips shook, but she couldn't make a sound. Later, after her husband passed away, my grandma was sleeping in that same room. She woke up to feel someone sit at the end of her bed. Even though no one was there, she could feel the weight of someone sitting and then lying down next to her, as though a husband or lover was beside her, wrapping their arms around her. She said, "The Lord told me that the thing was a familiar spirit." So she got up yelling, "No! I bind you, Satan, I bind you, leave this house now." After that, the spirit never bothered her again. She stayed in that house for about 2 months before she moved. The reason she left was that one night something roughly told her in a demonic voice to leave. As she rushed to her car, the door to the garage slammed shut behind her, and the door to her car wouldn't open even though the lock was up. When she finally managed to get into the car, she sped off without looking back. She never returned to the house. She had my aunt come and clean everything out for her. To this day, none of us have gone back except for my aunt, who went in only to clean